I'm McKinley Corbley, and you're listening to the ProPTN Podcast, an interview talk show for piano technicians to tune in to what the pros are talking about from across the industry. If you enjoyed today's episode, show us some love by following us on your podcasting platform and leaving us a review. To learn more about us here at the Professional Piano Technicians Network, visit us at proptn.org. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm your host, McKinley, and today on the podcast, I am so excited to be joined from across the pond by Colin Taylor. Colin is the program director of the PIPA trade show. That stands for Piano Industry Professionals and Producers Affiliated. And he has served as the technical director and head of international sales for Steffs and Schultz pianos for almost 10 years. In addition to founding the Joseph Brodmann Group and working as a concert technician for Bösendorfer, he was also a part-time lecturer on piano tuning and restoration at the London Guildhall University. Colin, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks, McKinley. It's great to join you on your podcast and hopefully you can shed a bit of light on my career to date.
Brilliant. Well, why don't you start off by giving us a brief overview of your career, how you got started in piano technology, and where it has taken you over the years?
Piano technology wasn't actually my first career. When I left school, I decided I needed to earn some money, so I started working for a bank in London. And so for 6 or so years, I worked in a branch office in the West End of London, and then circumstances changed. I felt I wasn't going anywhere fast enough, so I decided to change. And so this is in the late 70s. I actually started a timber restoration service with my eldest brother, again, totally removed from banking. And whilst doing that, one of the lads that I had working for us, who's now become a French polisher, had done 1-year course at what was then the London College of Furniture, training to be a piano tuner. And so I got talking to him, and as a young child, my mother was a pianist, my grandfather was a church organist, we had a piano at home, and I was always fascinated when the piano tuner came round and watched him take the piano to bits, tune it, and, obviously I could hear there was some difference after he'd been, which after all was his job.
Right.
So having got talking to this guy, I thought, well, I could do this, and okay, it would be a mature student, and I looked it up, and it was a 4-year course at that time. Long story short, I applied, I got accepted onto the course, and I actually completed mine in 3 years because I skipped a year, partly because I was a mature student, obviously. All the other guys that were on the course were like 18 or 16, and I was mid-20s. The other bonus of knowing this chap that had been on the course was that he had all the textbooks, the acoustics books and the music theory books and everything that I had to have. So I think I picked the lot up for £30. So I had a bit of a head start there. So that's when I went to what was the London College of Furniture, which is one of 3 locations that you could train at that time. Today, sadly, there's not one institution left who's teaching piano technology to any level anyway. So I did the course, and I was so lucky because the main course director there on the piano side was someone called Malcolm McKeon, who was at the time probably 10 years older than I was, but he was probably the top independent technician in the UK. So all of our year that went through, we were so lucky to have him. Whenever Under Schiff came to the UK, he was his personal technician,
Wow.
Did all the recordings for Decca and things like that. So, he was really at the top. So for 3 years, I studied piano technology, and that's what my qualification is. But it wasn't just tuning. It was restoration, acoustics, wood technology. So we learned from the inside out of all the pianos.
Yeah.
When I left the college with my qualification, at that stage, I started my own business, which included working part-time for Bösendorfer in London. I was looking after the pianos in the showroom. Whilst I was doing that, I then went back to college and I taught for 2 years upright workshop classes. It wasn't on the theory side, I was on the practical side. So I was in the workshop, right. And I taught tuning at evening class actually as well for people that just wanted to start off to learn how to tune. And then one thing led to another.
Yeah.
Then I became a full-time for Bösendorfer London. I became their concert technician. I was working with artists when they came over, not only in the classical field, but in the pop field. and Bösendorfer decided to open the only store outside Vienna in London.
Wow.
So they had a presence in London, which was part of another company, but they actually opened their own piano shop. And I think because in those days the CEO was someone called Dr. Radler, who'd been in charge of Bösendorfer for many, many years, he came to London and explained what he was planning to do. As usual, I sort of met him and was saying goodbye, and he said, would you just come in the taxi with me back to Heathrow? So I thought, well, that's a bit strange. Perhaps he wanted me to carry his bag or something. but in the taxi going back to Heathrow, that's when he actually offered me the job of the manager of the London Bösendorfer Piano Centre.
Wow.
And I think partly because I had business experience, because I had worked in the bank, so that stood me in good stead. Obviously, I had technical experience, and I had been helping out at the other shops. I had not much sales experience at the time. So that was it. So he gave me, I don't know, £20 to get back to central London. And from that moment on, I became a full-time employee. And that basically was the 7 years that I worked in London at the retail store. That took me up to sort of mid-90s, I guess.
Golly, that's quite a start to the career. Now, pivoting only a bit from your experience with Bösendorfer, I feel very privileged to have worked on Brodmanns the last few years because they are truly incredible pianos. But for all of the folks at home who may not have had the chance to experience a Brodmann, could you highlight some of your favorite aspects of their structural design and how you began working with Parsons as a manufacturer?
Yeah, sure. Just to recap slightly, in 1996, the then owners of Bösendorfer were Kimball International.
Right, yeah.
At the time, I didn't know it. They were looking to sell the company, which is why they closed the operation in London. And it was at that time I became Far East sales manager for Bösendorfer, which meant I was visiting all Bösendorfer customers in the Far East, from Japan right the way around through China, down to Australia and New Zealand. And I was doing certainly 4 trips a year, 5 times to Japan, because that was our biggest market.
Wow.
We had one distributor in Japan that was selling 60 to 70 Bösendorfers a year. So that was my responsibility to do that. And during that time, that's when I came across Parsons, because I attended Music Fair in China and I was looking for a distributor in China. And so I visited many, many different factories in China, just looking for someone that I felt the company could work with. At that time, the CEO of Bösendorfer was someone called Dr. Alt, and I wanted a bigger promotion budget in China because I felt there was more work to do, but the company didn't have any money to support that. So he said to me, well, if you can come up with an idea to generate income for China, then half of it can go to your promotional budget. So I thought, well, that's good. So it's at that stage with a colleague from Bösendorfer, someone called Christian Herfel, who was the sales director at the time. We came up with the idea, or I started the idea, why doesn't Bösendorfer have a second line? And this was before Steinway had started Boston with Kauai. So my idea was to have a German manufacturer make a midline Bösendorfer and an Asian manufacturer to make an Asian low-level product. The German product would go to the factory and then be distributed from Vienna, and the Asian product would be overseen by technicians but would be sent direct to the countries of sale. That's when I really checked into Parsons, and we went there, and the technical director from Bösendorfer visited them and saw what their facilities were and what their potential was. And at that stage, we came up with this whole plan, which has become known as the Brodmanns plan, but it was actually a no-name project. And we presented it, my colleague and I, to the company. And of course, we didn't know, but Kimball were about to sell the company. And so the last thing they wanted to do was to take on a new project that no one knew how it would work out.
Right.
On paper, it would have gone a long way to increasing Bösendorfer sales across the world, but it didn't happen. Kimball then sold the company, and it was sold to an Austrian bank called BAWAG. They were like a blue-collar workers bank. They had, a lot of connections with jobs in Austria. And so we again presented our idea to the management there, and they just couldn't understand why we would be wanting to give jobs to Germany and to China As I said, it makes no sense. So, of course, the idea died in the water. But we were so convinced that the idea was strong enough that my colleague and I, this was in 2004-05, left Bösendorfer and started Brodmanns.
Wow.
Why Brodmanns? Well, back in the late 18th century, there was a piano maker called Joseph Brodmanns. He was making pianos in Vienna, and he had about 25 students that came through with him. Unfortunately, he had no sons. So when he was ill, unable to continue, he passed his company on, or entrusted it to the best of his students, who happened to be a Mr. Bösendorfer.
Wow.
So in 1828, that's when Bösendorfer started. Mr. Bösendorfer, who was Mr. Brodmanns' best pupil, started the company. And then, as you know from the history of Bösendorfer, he got the license to build pianos for the court, and et cetera, et cetera. And then he became famous.
Wow.
He was the first piano that Liszt could play and didn't break. The stories go on. But getting back to the chase, that's how Brodmanns started. So we started. We took a 187 grand, which was the first grand that we worked on, and we had it sent to Germany. We displayed at the Frankfurt show in 2005. We perched on the corner of the Wilhelm Steinberg booth because Frederick Steffers, as in the name Steffers and Schultz, helped us by just saying, well, yes, put it on there and see. And that's where we got the first interest from what is now Piano Marketing Group, which is the company. They came over to the show, were looking for a new brand, and they still represent us in America today. So why Parsons? Well, they were the best company that I visited, and I still believe they produce the best pianos in China today. I mean, you've seen the evidence of that.
Absolutely.
How they're delivered and the shape they're in. I think I was there 2 weeks every 2 months, working with the technicians and setting it up and changing things slightly to the models that, well, I don't think all the models are still available today, but most of the models that we set up. And in terms of, how we did it,
right.
Well, I was just looking, because again, fortunate because of my piano technology, I was looking at the scaling of the pianos and speaking length and things like that. Certainly, I think they're some of the best made pianos. I mean, just as for instance, on the underside of the piano, where the support structure is connected into the rim, if you visit other factories or have seen videos, they just, they have a butt joint and a screw through the outer rim that goes through. Parsons, it's actually a mortise and tenon joint. It actually goes in and it's glued. So there's more connection between the underribs and the rim. And there are no screws involved at all. So you have a much better direct connection between the plate, the soundboard, and the rim. Again, having worked for Bösendorfer for 17 years, that was the sound I had in my mind.
Yeah.
When, we were looking at the voicing sound of it, and the sort of typical singing, sustaining tone that Bösendorfer had was something I tried to recreate.
Yeah, so rich, so resonant.
And, horses for courses. If you like a more strident, bright sound, in my Bösendorfer days, then you go for a Steinway. And Steinways are not bad pianos. They're good pianos, but they just do something slightly different to the way Bösendorfer build their pianos with a continuous rim, et cetera, et cetera. So.
Now, are you allowed to talk about the striking resemblance between the Brodmanns 187 to the Steinway A?
Yeah, I mean, it's no secret. What are China good at? What are their manufacturers good at? 30, 40 years ago, they had no technical knowledge as such. The younger factories certainly didn't. And so they copied. They copied. I mean, it's what's gone on for years. The old, when I grew up, if something was sort of cheap and cheerful and electronic, that's from Taiwan, because that's what they do. They copy stuff and, you just get that name for it. Well, if you look at the models that Parsons produced, the 187, that is, yes, a copy originally of a Steinway A. I mean, to the point where certainly not while I was there, but since, I know that they now put a bell, I think, underneath. Is that still there? I mean, that wasn't there in my day, but and there's the post connecting. So what we did was we took what they had and we made some improvements of it. I'm not saying Steinway A is a fantastic model. The B is their best model, in my opinion. The D is the second best, and then the A, and then the C is probably the one I like least. And that's because of the wound trichords on the long bridge. However good you are, I still think you can hear. It's hard to mask going across, not only from the long bridge and then onto the bass bridge. So, it's an improved version of a Steinway A copy. Obviously, the 211 is the B, or the 212 it is. And the C model is copied again. And Parsons, as you know, make a concert grand now very successfully. And that's obviously born out of a D. And the 162, I don't know if you've come across that, the Brodmanns 162.
The smaller ones, I think so.
Yeah, if you have a look at it, next time you look at it, look how wide the soundboard is and how wide that is. It's like quite a dumpy piano, to speak of it like that. I mean, that's sort of following the Boston example. If you copy something, that's sort of the height of flattery, isn't it? So.
Yeah. Well, this gives us a great segue into one of my other questions, which was, you mentioned the trichord bass strings on the bridge of the C and how difficult that is to voice. What were some of the most valuable lessons that you learned as a Bösendorfer concert technician? Did you develop any practices or procedures that you feel are a must for concert tuning or voicing in particular?
You cannot hope to voice a piano unless it's absolutely properly tuned and regulated. Because otherwise, what are you doing? You're trying to voice out something that might be, I don't know, an incorrect down weight, or,
let off too close.
Or let's think what else. I mean...
hammer string mating also. Unless that falls under the same umbrella.
Phasing, I call that. Where the hammer's hitting two strings and then one string after. And you get that little sing at the start of the note. So that has to be perfect. So that being said, obviously you're voicing to the studio, the hall, the concert venue, wherever you are. So you have to take the acoustics into account. And if there was someone around, obviously musical, probably connected with the concert, getting to stand at the back and just, is this clear sound coming through, or does it need to be slightly brighter, etc. But in terms of that, hopefully, if you're going to a concert or a studio, the piano's been prepared anyway. And so you have to accept that it is where it is, and that in probably 30 or 40 minutes, you might not have much time to change what's there significantly enough to make the improvement you'd like to do. But one of the things I always used to do, what does a pianist always do? They're trying... Can I play pianissimo? Is it going to escape properly? So one of the final things I did, having checked everything, obviously pedals, track work and squeaks and everything, got rid of those. I used to use, I don't know if you've come across Vienna chalk, have you?
Vienna chalk? No, I don't think so.
You've heard of French chalk, which is a very fine powder. Well, Vienna chalk's even finer. And I used to have a little brush, and I would put a little bit of chalk on the rollers, on the knuckles, as you call them. And that would have the effect of up to 5 grams in terms of touch, because it's a lubricant. It's a dry lubricant, okay?
Yeah.
And that, as long as the knuckles are on the right way round and the jack's not working against the leather or anything like that, the pianist would feel comfortable. He could actually worry about the music he was making than having to do, as I call it, pianistic gymnastics, just to cope with the action, and some notes are heavier than others. That's one tip that I certainly used to use on a regular basis.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's already healthier than using Teflon instead.
Oh, yeah, because that will stay in the leather and eventually harden up, and then you'll have a different problem with noise and everything. So, this is something that you could do over the course of the concert. The notes being played, it won't be there at the end of the concert.
Wow, that's a good tip. I also had a colleague recently tell me that using a soapstone can work as a natural lubrication, and it felt like just a smooth piece of, it's almost like sea glass, but it was a bit like a...
Yeah, just ordinary soap. That would be something else. I would check. Unicorder pedal, is it all travelling correctly?
Yeah.
And it takes no time to flip the action up. And then on the domes and on the front rail, I would have, in my toolcase, I've got a piece of dry soap. And you just rub it along. It's a dry lubricant. It's silent. I mean, that's a normal thing that I think I was probably taught that at Bösendorfer, because I did some training in Vienna as well. So I think that's something that they do as a regular basis.
Well, during your time lecturing at the university, what was your favorite lesson to share with the students? Did you have any particular tips, tricks, or concepts that consistently hit home in the classroom?
Nothing in particular, but I think it was important that a lot of students learn through being shown things on a screen, handed out notes, go away and learn these and what have you. I never did that. I always would show practically. If you can do it yourself, you can teach someone, and you can teach them by letting them watch you doing what you're doing. And so I would never rely on notes. I would just, get up, demonstrate what we had to do, then ask them to do it and go walk around. I probably had 14, 15 students. I had like a 3-hour session in the morning and afternoon. So there was long enough to go around, make sure everyone understood the project we were doing for the day, So I would never ask someone to do or teach someone to do something I couldn't do myself.
Well said.
And I never, ever liked being asked a question I couldn't answer.
Noted. That I'll tiptoe around these next.
No, it didn't happen very often, but it's just one of those things. You know what you're going to do that day, and you make sure you've covered most of the things you think people might ask.
Right.
That's how you get the students' confidence. That's how I got confidence. My teacher, Malcolm McKeon, because he was pretty so good at everything that even when you tried to catch him out, you couldn't. So.
And speaking of learning and commiserating, hello, this is McKinley from the editing room again, just to remind you that if you have not already signed up for a ProPTN subscription, you're seriously missing out. Whether you need articles from our Beginner's Corner to help supplement your students' education, or if you're a seasoned tech who wants a refresher on certain specialty skills, ProPTN has got you covered with peer-reviewed editorial content, video demonstrations, and photographed step-by-step instructionals. On top of that, the collection is our online marketplace that is a must for maintaining your tool collection. If you want to try a tuning lever before you buy it, you can check out our Rent-A-Lever program. If you make and design your own tools, you can sign up to distribute them through the collection. If you're a retiring technician, we can sell your tool collection on consignment, or you can just go shopping for a whole selection of new and used tools from brands and technicians you trust. ProPTN also maintains a Discord forum where us technicians can commiserate about experiences in the field, share tool tips and tricks, and ask for insights from our peers. All of this and more for just $65 a year. Let me tell you, I have spent $65 on so many more ridiculous purchases and tools I never ended up using, but ProPTN has been an invaluable resource for its members since the get-go. We also have student memberships for the Greenhorn, but for all others, what are you waiting for? Go sign up now, and you'll thank me later. Anyway, back to the show. Right. Well, I have found that the more that I work with different manufacturers, the more similar I find their methods to be. However, are there any particular practices or procedures that you feel are a must for doing things the right way? Any tactics that you feel are the most important?
When you're out in the field, again, it comes down to knowledge. I think if you're looking to do a service on a piano and set it up the way it should be, the way it was done in the factory when it started, bearing in mind you might have to reface the hammers, and obviously the hammer blow is going to change the distance. But I think it does help if you have a good idea of what the original factory settings were. So, for instance, on a Steinway, you're looking at, in our language, 11 mil touch depth, whereas Bösendorfer was 10.2, whereas, other factories have different settings. So you try and reset the piano to what the factory settings were when it was originally built. So I think that's important too, and that's something you only pick up with experience or you can read about, but again, you have to do it. I got to the stage where, I guess I would still do now, I don't practice technically so much anymore, but if I'm checking touch depth, I wouldn't need a block. After a while, you get used to what the difference between 10.2 and 11 is, for instance. You can tell.
So you would just kind of do it by touch?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's the same as, tuning. I was taught to tune orally.
Yeah.
That's how I tune, and I appreciate that if you're on the road doing, 5-6 tunings a day of beat up old uprights, then having a tuning aid or device will help you. It'll probably stop you going mad, and it'll save your ears some work if you're doing that 4 days a week,
Right.
50 weeks a year. So I can understand that, but I am a believer that if you use those tuning aids, I think it helps to know how to tune orally first, and then the aids help you afterward. Yeah. Because unless you really understand coincident harmonics and, what are you listening for, and, why when you play a fifth, does something go on up 2.5 octaves above that you're listening to, and a fifth and a fourth, and how you first set up your scale. I think if you understand that, then it must help you do your tuning overall, especially when it comes to stretching.
Especially in concert work as well, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about Pippa. As program director, what has been your vision for helping to plan this particular trade show, and what are some of the things that you are most excited about?
This will be its second year next year. This year was the first Pippa, and there's some exciting things coming up. I mean, why was Pippa formed in the first place? Perhaps we could look at that. I can't remember the first NAMM show I went to. I'm not sure I'm allowed to say NAMM when I'm talking about Pippa. Sorry. Okay. No. I'm just joking. That other show is. I've been going there for many, many years back. The early Bösendorfer days when they used to have a large booth there. Over the years, I mean, I wasn't around when it started, but the NAMM show originally was for pianos. It was basically a piano show with other things added on. And over the years, it's kind of been usurped and overtaken with, probably quite rightly, with, guitars and all the other instruments. But I just feel that certainly in the last 6 or 7 years, I don't feel the piano industry has been really looked after as much as some of the other industries that are represented at NAMM. And so I think there was a need for the Pippa to evolve out of that, which is basically a show for all things to do with pianos, any aspect of pianos. So if you like, the piano community has a chance to come together, now, whether it's technicians or dealers or manufacturers or piano teachers or technicians, they're all under one roof. And the thing I like about Pippa is, okay, it's a sort of a 48-hour experience, but you go there and everything's catered for. When you go to the NAMM show, you have to find a hotel, you have to get transport, you have to have parking, which is a nightmare if you've been to Anaheim. Then you have to have your food, and then you have to pay for your electricity and your booth and your fridges and everything else. It's all add on. And we were spending, I don't know, $15,000-$20,000 on not a large booth each year just to show at NAMM. And so the whole idea, the concept of Pippa is that there's one fee if you're as an exhibitor or if you're going as a visitor to visit. And that one fee, you get picked up from the airport in a bus, you have your accommodation is all looked after for 2 days, all your food, and the food at the hotel is fantastic. You have a gala dinner. One evening you go out to a show. We did Cirque du Soleil this year, which was fantastic. You have the technical classes going on. You've got manufacturers represented with their booths. You can go. You've got people that are connected. You've got dealers that have come in. And you can just sit down, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and you're meeting all these people. And it's, it's a captive audience. I didn't go out of the hotel once in 48 hours. You don't have to because everything's provided for you. Yeah. And it's all there. So you can choose your classes. You can choose manufacturers. There's time to go and sit and play. There's not a whole lot of other noise going on all around you. You're not being disturbed by the guitar booth in the next room, or, you happen to be next to Gibson, so, you can't hear yourself think. It's quieter, and you get a chance to sit down there. Because you're in the hotel, you can go down at 8 o'clock in the morning, you can go and play a piano, there's no one else in the room, so you can hear it. And it's not only, in terms of art, but they're bench manufacturers there, they're string. Yeah. I know next year, WNG are going to be there with piano disc. There are other piano systems there. So it's everything involved with pianos for pianists, for technicians, for dealers. They're training classes, so dealers can send their younger salespeople there so that they could be trained how to sell better for the dealer. So it's exciting. I think it's long overdue, and I know that people have talked about it for a long time.
Yeah.
But now finally it's coming together, and I know there are more exhibitors next year than there were this year. So yeah, it's going to grow.
Yeah. And contrary to how loud the atmosphere is at NAMM, I heard that the pit atmosphere was very intimate, very conducive for the kind of invaluable one-on-one time that you can't get at other more crowded conventions. Can you tell us about any highlights or particularly memorable interactions that you witnessed or participated in?
Well, in January, I certainly met people that I would not have met at an AM show. I met other manufacturers. I mean, I know other manufacturers, but I'd never met, for instance, Susanna Petrov's daughter, Anna.
Right.
So I spent quite some time talking with her and sharing our experiences. I met some new dealers for the first time that I'd never met before. So, yeah, I just think it's an immersive experience.
Yeah.
That, you can totally lose yourself into a piano world that it's not possible to do at NAMM. Not only for the fact you have to leave the show in the evening, wait 40 minutes in a car park to get out, by which time all your enthusiasm's drained away. So you can be at dinner with people in the evening, you can share breakfast, so you make sure you sit at different tables and talk to different people. This next show, there's a bigger area they're developing on pedagogy. So they've got some good classes for teachers that are coming along. So we're hoping other piano teachers can come and learn from the experienced few that are giving some classes.
Well, I mean, learning from you alone was so invaluable. I mean, you've been crushing this interview thus far. It's almost like you've done it before.
Well, it's basically my life for the last 40 years. So it's I don't have to remember anything because I've done it all, And,
right.
And contrary to you, I don't know how much longer I'm going to be doing this, but after Pippa, I'll be 70 next year. So, so I don't know how much longer. I just enjoy doing it, and I enjoy helping and sharing my knowledge. So, that's why I do it. And I guess on that basis, I can carry on doing it for a while. But, we'll see.
That's a really sweet anecdote right there.
You have a lifetime of anecdotes, don't you?
A very rich tapestry of anecdotes.
Yeah, like a story at Bösendorfer when a young apprentice, his job was to clean the pianos in the selection room. And so he was doing this. And this is Dr. Radler that I mentioned earlier, who was the CEO of Bösendorfer for a long time. He was cleaning all the pianos, dusting them all and cleaning the frames and wiping the keys. On one of the pianos, happened to be an Imperial, he saw like a black mark on the frame. So he diligently polished it up and cleaned it all off and what have you. Unbeknown that was a piano that Lenny Bernstein had signed for one of the customers.
Oh my gosh.
Who was coming in to try it, and he approved the piano, and then a customer was coming and was going to buy it because it had his signature on it.
And he erased the signature?
This was back in the 70s. He erased the signature, yeah. Oh my God. So fortunately, Dr. Radler had a letter from Lenny Bernstein, and he put it back on the frame.
He forged the signature back?
Yeah, he put it back.
Okay.
Yeah, he did it himself. But hey, what are you going to do? And I think the guy was cleaning pianos for 2 years after that.
Oh my gosh. Oh, poor guy. All right. Now, did you yourself learn anything particularly new or exciting from any of the classes at the last convention, or were you just busy running the show?
I was not running the show, but I was running the booth. We had a booth there. And two of my colleagues from Germany gave classes, one on concert track work. It was very specific. And his son, actually, Jakob Schultz, did a class on the history of the German piano industry and their family within it, because the Schultz family, again, that's interesting, but for another time. But Christoph is the fifth generation Schultz piano maker, and his great-great-great-great-grandfather was someone called Helfrich Schultz, one of three people that bought the company when Henry Steinway left to go to New York. So the Grother and Steinbeck family, he is one of the founders of Grother and Steinbeck, and Christoph is a fifth generation piano maker. He studied at Steinway, but he's a fifth generation piano maker. So that's the company I'm working with in Germany, or working for in Germany. So
I do love a Grother as well. Those are some fabulous pianos.
Yeah.
Well, as someone who has been working across so many corners of the industry for so long, Are there any particular areas of research or experience that you hope to see the next generation of technicians continue or improve upon?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of things. One, my ambition when I was at college was for there to be a world-class British concert piano. And through the technician that taught me, Malcolm McKeon, and other people that have worked for Broadwood and, top technicians, I know that it could have been built in the UK. We had manufacturers at the time, and the knowledge was there, and I wanted to try and be the catalyst to try and bring all this together. That was my dream. To the extent that whilst I was still at college, I wrote off to probably 30 top names that have made their money out of playing the piano or being involved with the piano, Elton John, people like that. And I think I got 2 replies, and both of which were no. So that dream died quite early, which is a shame, because I think there was a case for a properly funded, proper British piano manufacturer to produce a world-beating piano. So that didn't happen. In terms of other things, one thing that I would love to be the person to cure, but hasn't happened, and I'm sure that you've come across not so well set up upright pianos where you get what I describe as bubbling on the strings. So if you're playing at sort of, I don't know, pianissimo or something like that, then you don't push the key, or you do push the key down, but then butt comes back, hits the top of the jack, and then bounces back on the strings. And I mean, it doesn't matter. I can make it happen on a Bösendorfer or a Steinway.
Yeah.
You have to be a technician or a very good pianist for it to happen. But I have had to go out and look, and I mean, there are ways around it, but it means you have to compromise the blow distance and various things, or the touch. So I would love to solve that. Actually, at NAMM this year, I saw someone that had like a grand action in an upright, which partly cured it.
With a repetition spring, right?
Some
kind of repetition spring.
Yeah, it was more like a grand setup in an upright. And I think it was on the Charles Walter piano.
Oh.
Which is part of Walters. And I'm not certain if they are now helping Bell River in America, but I think there's some connection there, some tie-up. And a technician I know, Paul Ray, who you may know, who worked with High-Loom for some time, is now working with them, and he was demonstrating that system. It's the first time I've seen it.
Oh, you know
but
what?
It certainly looked interesting.
I think I also saw something like that. Yeah, absolutely.
I wasn't allowed to take a photo of it, which was a shame because I wanted to study it. It's been a bugbear of mine for years, and I've spoken to other designers. A good friend of mine in the UK is David Martin from Herberger Brooks, who, came out with the... Did you ever remember the BP jack? There was a little return spring behind the jack, which pushed it back under. I mean, it was fine whilst it worked, but then it was a hell to regulate, like all these systems, they're fine when they work.
But then they don't.
But then they don't. I mean, that's, in my opinion, I don't know, but that's the reason that they had the screw adjustment on the Hertz spring.
Right. Because
it's easier to adjust and it stays in regulation longer, but the Hertz spring, of course, is the preferable system. But harder to regulate properly.
Okay, so better upright action and...
The concert grand I wanted to produce, which never happened. But,
English-sourced concert grand.
Yeah, built in Britain.
Yeah, our friends over at Piano Smiths, actually, one of the makers was on the podcast, and he talked about how they've been working really hard to source all the materials for their tools from Britain. And I really enjoyed hearing about that. I think sustainability is usually kind of a reoccurring theme that comes from that question, and sustainably sourced materials is usually a large part of that.
Yeah, and interestingly, one of the exhibitors at Pippa next year, I believe, is going to be a European toolmaker, Jan.
Yeah, I just interviewed Andreas yesterday. Yeah, he's such a sweetheart, and he also talked about how important sustainability was to him.
Yeah, sure. I hope that more people from Europe, I think Blutner will be there. I presume Christian Blutner is coming. So, I think there's going to be more participation now. You're probably aware of the Nuremberg exhibition. Have you heard of that? I've been the last couple of years, and the first year was very quiet. I think there was just Steingraber and Jan were the only 2 piano-related people that were there, and some students. Last year, it was just about every manufacturer was there.
Golly.
Really well attended and interesting. And again, it's a show for music.
Yeah.
It's pianos, guitars, or all stringed instruments. The beauty about the Pippa show is that it's specifically piano related in all aspects, but something that hasn't happened before.
Yeah. Now, I only have one more question for you. To wrap us up, Can you tell us about your favorite part of piano technology and your favorite tool?
Oh, wow. Well, I think being a technician, the favourite tool's got to be your tuning crank, hasn't it?
You use it every day.
If you have nothing else, if you have nothing else and that's all that's left, then, that and a wedge, you can carry on making your living, So,
what kind of tuning lever do you have?
It's quite a short one. It was from a supplier here, Hexers, that I bought way back in the early 80s. It's not fixed. I can change the heads on it, but it is quite a short one. I know some have the big ones that I've always managed with my thumb on the end. I feel I've got more control.
Right.
It's a personal thing, I guess.
Yeah. I have really enjoyed asking people because the answers definitely vary across the countries, but that just leaves your favorite part of piano technology.
I just think every day's new, learning, whether you're in a factory in China seeing something for the first time or someone asking you, they put a problem with this, can you solve it? I just think it's fascinating. Right from the early days when my very first year at college, fortunate, I had a lecturer there who was really keen and he was sort of bubbling with enthusiasm about what piano technology and pianos are all about. And I think I caught it, whatever he had, I caught. And I just find it fascinating just to, A, try and improve things, but B, just trying to make what's already there the best it can be and solve problems. So it's a fascinating journey and one I'm still going on. And I'm certain I'll learn more, when I visit dealers in America, which I did earlier this year. It's just fun to see how people do things slightly differently and very often better than I've done them before. So you pick up these things as you go along.
What do you think is the most undervalued and underrepresented quality in a piano technician?
I think people have, in the past, I'm not certain today because I'm not doing it on a day-to-day basis, but people have this sort of idea, rather like school teachers, that a piano technician, guy or gal, turns up and they've got a jacket on and leather patches on the elbows. And, I think the knowledge that piano technicians gain over the years of doing this, whether it's they've been out in the field for 3 years or 30 years, I think people perhaps undervalue the fact that they've done this job and the training that they've gone through to get. I know it's not like becoming a doctor or anything else, but you are a doctor of the piano. And so you are there to solve things that aren't right. And you are there to tune it. And when you leave it, the patient, the piano, is better than when you went there in the first place. So I think people perhaps don't value the training, the experience that technicians have had and gained over the years. And that's something that perhaps it's not up high enough on their list of priorities about people they should think kindly of.
Yeah.
And this guy's come to help fix my piano.
That's gorgeous. Yeah, my dad also says the same thing about my job. He says I'm a piano doctor.
Yeah. Well, you are.
You
are, because that's what you're there to make the patient better, and you do.
Amen. All right, Colin. Well, thank you so much for joining us. You have been a fabulous guest, and I'm already looking forward to seeing you at Pippa.
Yeah, no, thank you, and thank you for obviously getting up this early to facilitate this podcast.
My pleasure. Now, if you want to be able to continue picking Colin's brain about his incredible career, the upcoming Pippa Trade Show is on January 28th to the 30th in Las Vegas. But be sure to register before December 1st in order to get the all-inclusive rate. You'll be able to enjoy one-on-one time with such hard-hitting company representatives as those from Blutner, Heilun, Brodmanns, Kiyoshi Silent Systems, Kaiserberg, Mason & Hamlin, Wessel, Nickel & Gross, Pearl River, Petroff, Jan, and others. To register or learn more, simply check out pippaevent.org.